In this video, I'll walk you through Claude skills and how to use them. Keep in mind, I'm not just trying to teach you a random topic. The people that learn how to use these tools to their fullest potential are going to reap the most reward. So it's going to have a direct impact on your ability to use AI and leverage it. Once we do an overview, I'll walk you through some examples to really drive home the points that we talk about. Keep in mind, this video is specifically for people that are not technical and do not know how to code, but are interested in learning how to better leverage AI. I'm Timothy. I work at a Fortune 500 company in advanced analytics, and we use AI in our work every day. So let me show y'all some things. Fundamentally, there is only one idea I want you to focus on for this entire video, which is trash in, trash out. Said differently, the quality of the input that you give Claude is going to directly determine the output that it gives you back. So let's take a look at what's on the screen. Imagine Claude's brain is a backpack. In technical terms, this is the context window, if you have heard that jargon. That backpack represents a fixed amount of space to hold information at any one time. With this backpack analogy, I want you to think about whenever you were in school and think about packing your backpack for the day. Well, you would only pack your backpack with the books for the classes that you actually had that day, right? It wouldn't make sense to pack your science textbook in if you didn't have science class that day. Here is what is really interesting. When we're using Claude, a big mistake that we make is we try to stuff it with as much information and context as possible, even if that information or context is not actually relevant. What happens is Claude starts to have a hard time to understand what is important with all of this information that I have been given. And not only does it have a hard time understanding what is important, it starts to focus on things that actually aren't important. That's where the stuffed backpack issue comes into play, which is really interesting. Traditionally, we try to force as much context into Claude as possible. I want you to write code for me. I want you to make charts for me. I want you to format PDFs for me. But by stuffing all of these instructions into Claude, we actually run into the issue of filling the backpack up way too much to the point where no more information can actually fit. So that's where the concept of skills comes into play, which is really interesting. Imagine instead of carrying every textbook in your backpack, you actually put them on a shelf. And Claude picks them up only when it needs them. So you no longer have this issue of a stuffed backpack or quote unquote context window, because now Claude is able to only take off the shelf the information or context that it specifically needs. That's the overall general concept of skills, but let's start to dive a little bit deeper. Remember, I said that this video is for people that are not technical and do not know how to code. Great news is that a skill isn't magic code. It isn't Python. It isn't crazy JavaScript. It's actually just a folder containing a simple text file called skill.md. And that folder or file is just an instruction manual. Let's review the instruction manual or the actual details of what a Claude skill looks like. Fundamentally, I just want you to think of Claude skills as instruction manuals or standard operating procedures. For example, let's say I ask Claude, can you please create me a YouTube thumbnail? Well, Claude has two paths ahead of it. A, it can either research online and do a bunch of searching to figure out the best way to create a YouTube thumbnail, or I can completely skip that step and point Claude towards a YouTube skill or YouTube instruction manual that I've already created that explains step by step exactly what I want it to do. Well, fundamentally, That is what these instruction manuals are for. But the interesting part, if we think about the stuffed backpack issue, is that if we look at the quote unquote label here, so part 1, and to see that in action, it's this part that's highlighted in blue. This is extremely important to understand when thinking about Claude skills. So in the YouTube thumbnail example, let's say I have 10 other skills that Claude has access to. Well, do I want Claude to be spending time digging through each one of those skills to figure out what is actually useful or how it can best accomplish what I asked for it? No. All I want is for Claude to just skim the labels of those skills or instruction manuals so that it knows exactly what to do. So this part here is the short description that Claude skims to know that this is the right skill for the task at hand. Really, really interesting. Let's look at another example. Let's say I ask Claude to make me a PowerPoint, and I have 100 different skills in my folder. Claude will then sort through all of the labels or that first part of the instruction manual to see which one is relevant for making a PowerPoint. And then it'll extract that instruction. Then it'll extract that instruction manual to be able to actually execute that task successfully. So make a PowerPoint, then Claude finds the matching label that is relevant to the task, and then it'll read that skill file to actually know the instructions for what to do. I really, really like this visualization, which is simple stays simple and complex gets support. So if we just have a standard task, I genuinely don't want Claude to run all over the place to figure it out. But if I have a complex task, then that's where I want my instructions to actually get loaded so that Claude knows how to perform the task successfully. Claude only reads the top instructions for easy tasks. It digs deeper only when the task gets hard. Now, here is a great visualization for one of the big benefits of skills. Fundamentally, it has to do with tokens. So, because skills solve the issue of the stuffed backpack, then we are able to efficiently use Claude so much better. So if we think about a task that would take 6,300 tokens, well, now with skills, it'll only take 800. And if you don't know what a token is, because I didn't either, essentially just think about it as the amount of compute power required to complete a task. Also, tokens is the kind of technical jargon for the units that make up a context window. So for example, if we think about the backpack, say a backpack can only fit 100,000 tokens. Well, do I want 6,300 tokens taken up by things that are not relevant to the task at hand? No, I only want to feed that backpack the exact amount of information that's needed to complete the task. And then the more I need to feed it, then I'll now have the actual bandwidth to be able to do so because I didn't use up all my tokens with inefficiency doing it the old way. Here's something that is also really interesting that kind of shifted my mentality. Earlier, if you remember, I said, kind of think of skills as instruction manuals or SOPs. Well, if you think about what a standard operating procedure is, it's a way to get the same result every time when faced with a specific task. So, for example, let's say I am a customer service agent and someone is asking if they can change the delivery address on their order. Well, that's a pretty common ask. And to make sure I want that task handled the same way every time, well, I would have a standard operating procedure so that no matter who did that task, it would have the same results. So when you think about Claude skills, fundamentally, they are so important when it comes to tasks that you have to do on a recurring basis. So let's say you write a blog post on LinkedIn once a week. Well, you would want a Claude skill that had examples of your writing style and tone so that every time it helped you write a blog post, it would always come out standardized. Claude will follow the same manual every time, which means you get the same quality results on Monday as you do Friday. So that part is really, really important. Here is something interesting. So far up until this point, we have talked about using skills in a silo. So I need to make a PDF. So please make me a PDF by using the PDF skill. But what happens when you have a complex task that needs more than one skill? Well, the amazing thing is that skills are modular. You can combine them to handle more complex tasks as needed. So think about the iceberg example. Everything below the water are the complex tasks that will need maybe more than one skill. Now, you might be asking, okay, Timothy, that's cool, but I'm not a coder. Well, here's what's interesting. You can just ask for Claude's help to write that skill. And here's the funny thing. There is a Claude skill for writing skills. And it's kind of like Inception. Now, that is the overview of Claude skills, but to really drive home the point of what they are and how to use them and the benefit of them, we need to go through some actual examples. So let's do that now. Now, let's look at some interesting examples of skills actually in action. But before we do, let's take a step back and think about what we walked through up until this point. If you remember, we mentioned trash in, trash out. So the sole goal of skills is for us to improve the input of what we're giving Claude. The few ways that it does that is it standardizes the process so that if you have a recurring task, then you can use the same skill so that you get the same output every time. Second, it efficiently uses the information that it chooses to insert into its backpack or context window. And if you remember, the reason that it is important for us to only make sure the agent or Claude is using relevant information is because if we stuff it with too many resources, then that is going to directly negatively affect the output that we get. There are a few other benefits, but those are the fundamental ones that I want you to take away from the video. We are in VS Code, and I have uploaded skills that directly came from Anthropic. If we take a look, it's this list of skills here. We have things like front-end design, we have a PDF skill, we have a PowerPoint skill, we have a Slack GIF creator. Oh, we also have a skill that helps you create skills, if you remember the Inception that I was talking about earlier in the video. Now, let's take a look at using the Slack GIF creator. Please create a GIF of a dog giving a side eye. Now, Claude is looking at my inputs and it is referencing all of the different skills to see which one is relevant for this specific task. If we take a look deeper, this is the flow. I asked Claude a specific input, or I gave it a specific input. Then it looks at the context of this input and quickly skims through the first part of every one of these skills. So if you remember, every one of these skills in the instruction manual has a part at the beginning that gives a quick summary of what the skill is for and when to use it for what cases. It looks like Claude has finished making that GIF or GIF. Let me know down in the comments. So let's take a look at what it looks like. Oops. Okay, here is our dog giving a side eye. Now, think about if I would have asked Claude this without any skills. What would happen is that Claude would search in two different places. It would look in its knowledge base to see if it has any information on how to develop GIFs for Slack. Second, it could do research online to try and find any information about how to do this. But fundamentally, think about if this is a recurring task. Do we want Claude to go through that process every single time? No. We just want it to follow these instructions that we have given it, which is why skills were created. Let's look at another example. Let's say I want to create a PowerPoint. Create a 5-slide PowerPoint on beavers. Now, when I ask Claude this question or give it this task, it's going to look through all of the skills like we talked about, and it's specifically going to use the PowerPoint skill. It's not going to use the GIF skill this time. And that part is fundamentally important to understand because you need to make sure that your instruction manuals or skills have a part at the beginning that makes it very clear as to what this instruction manual is actually for. It looks like our PowerPoint on beavers has finished being created. So let's take a look at how it looks. And here is our presentation on beavers. I think in terms of the actual information that is in the slides, that is fine. But obviously from a design perspective, it could use a lot of work. And when I say use a lot of work, what I'm referring to is the actual instruction manual that is used for this PowerPoint skill can use some edits to improve the actual designs of the slides. And an interesting use case here is if you have specific guidelines, then what you would do is use those guidelines in your instruction manual so that every slide deck that got created was under those guidelines. Pretty cool. Now, that concludes this video about Claude skills. And hopefully by this point, I hope you understand why they're useful and how you can leverage them to get better outputs from Claude or any AI model that you use. My name is Timothy. I make videos for non-technical people to understand AI, and I really appreciate you watching up until this point. Thank you.